Welcome to the Delegates Lounge. Pull up a chair. I'm Alex Tarquinio, a journalist based at the United Nations here in New York City, and your MC for this podcast, featuring some of the most influential minds in the world today. Settle in for some riveting tete-a-tete, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Welcome back to the second part of our extended interview with Dave Smith, a former major in the Canadian Armed Forces who resigned to fight for Ukraine in a battalion of foreign fighters primarily from Belarus, known as the Kalinoŭski Regiment. We introduced you to Dave in part 1, which you can find in our playlist. For that episode, we spoke with him in July when he was rotating back into the battle for eastern Ukraine this summer. He talked with us again in October and gave a first-hand account from the zero line, or the point of contact between the Ukrainian and Russian forces in northern Kharkiv, very close to where Ukrainian troops took Russian territory in Kursk. That was before some consequential geopolitical developments. Confirmation that North Korean troops have come to fight Ukrainians for Russia, and Trump's political comeback. So although we originally planned to finish with the second episode about Dave's impression after the battle, we now plan to publish a third episode that focuses more on the battlefield developments and brings listeners up to date. In this episode, Dave focuses on the human aspects of warfare. He spent some time in hospital in Kharkiv and relates what life is like for the doctors, nurses, and patients in, as he calls it, the last stop before Mordor. He talks about the treatment of POWs and conscripts on both sides. And he explains how social media is used at the front. He described watching a video of the trench that he was in being hit by Russians 2 days earlier on the social media app Telegram. He graciously shared that video with us, and we added that to our Instagram and X accounts. We'll share those links with you in the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find a link to an essay that I wrote for Foreign Policy about soft power that mentions the North Atlantic Fella Organization, an internet meme that bases its name on NATO. They call themselves fellas and identify their accounts with cartoon avatars of Shiba Inu dogs, or occasionally cats. Dave sheds light on how the NAFO fellas are viewed on the front lines. So, without further ado, here's Dave. Well, Dave, we're so glad to be able to hear that you're safe and to be able to speak with you again at the end of your latest tour on the eastern front of Ukraine and hear how things are going.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on.
It's awesome that you've deigned to be on our program, considering what you've been through.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop you right there because you're making me blush here. But as long as we're having the mutual appreciation society right now, I will tell you, you guys are the only ones that have like really reached out and consistently asked me for my thoughts and observations of what's going on here. So credit to the Delegates Lounge for, trying to get to the truth of what's actually happening on the battlefield and what all of these big picture, geopolitical developments mean for the guys that are actually fighting on the front. Wars are not won on the battlefield. They're won in the information environment. And just the fact that you saw this time to have a podcast like this, where you talk about these issues, like it is super important. It's just as important as running around like an idiot in the woods and getting blown up. No,
it's not.
If I could have explained this to my chain of command back in the Canadian military, or more importantly, the Minister of Defense and the politicians, if they listened, I wouldn't be here. I would be doing that work. But after the first year of the war, where I was deployed working with the Ukrainians and trying to just plead with the decision makers in Ottawa, DC, London, guys, like, we got to take this seriously. After a year of it, I just gave up. I was like, you know what? I'll go run around in the woods. Maybe I can do more good that way.
We know that you were in hospital Can you tell us a little bit about how you were injured and went to hospital this tour?
It was not a horrible injury. I actually had complete imposter syndrome because I was in the hospital room with 5 Ukrainians who were like legitimately injured. And I was just lying there, getting monitored for concussion. So I don't want to make it sound like it was super serious. But what happened was, imagine a big long tree line that is running kind of north-south, and it's about 1 kilometer wide. I was on the far east side of it when there was some M113s doing casualty evacuations all day because we were taking a lot of casualties that day. And all that happened was the M113 was like racing in, racing out. There was one with a Ukrainian driver, one with a Belarusian driver. And these guys are like absolute unsung heroes of the war. Anyone that is an M113 driver in Eastern Ukraine is just crazy. Like, they're crazy and heroic. And they were racing up and down the side of the tree line that I was on, taking out injured guys. And the Russians, after they made a few trips, were just like pummeling that track that they were on with, I believe it was artillery rounds. And they were just hoping to either disrupt the M113s, maybe hit an M113, maybe injure people getting in and out of it.
And for our listeners, can you define an M113?
Sorry, I was just saying it because you guys are Americans. It's an American armored vehicle that was donated to Ukraine. It's generally, I think,
for evacuations.
Yeah, they use them for all kinds of things. Where I was that particular day, they had 2 of them that were being used for medical evacuations because we were taking casualties. Yeah, these guys were just, like these drivers are just, as soon as someone was injured at the zero line where I was, a vehicle showed up within minutes and they were getting these guys out of here. So I really want to make the story kind of about them and what they were doing. I just happened to be on the side of the tree line where the Russians were bombing them. And we were in like little slit trenches, me and one of my Belarusian comrades, and a round landed like right outside of it. And I was actually in the trench. I was lying down. It was like we call them shell scrapes. It's like maybe a couple feet deep. It's not like a trench system. It's more like a little fighting trench. And we knew the rounds were coming. It had been happening all day. And one landed. It was extremely close because it rolled me out. Like the force of it rolled my body over. And they classified it as a shrapnel wound, but I didn't actually get hit by any like shrapnel from the round. What happened was there were these little trees in between each of the trenches that were actually holding up the overhead cover that I was talking about. And those trees exploded from the force of the blast, and a whole bunch of wood chunks just flew at me. So I basically got like giant splinters in my neck.
But it is classified as a shrapnel wound to the neck.
Yeah. But don't tell my mom that. I haven't used those words to my mom or my wife or anybody. But yeah, that's like how they classify it. But
anything to the neck is potentially life-threatening. So it was potentially very dangerous, and it sounds like the kind of wound you were lucky to walk away from.
Yeah. And I did literally walk away from it because what happened was after that round landed, my fire team partner and I were like, okay, we can't stay here. This is obviously untenable. So he was looking at me and I was like, dude, am I bleeding? And he's like, yeah, man, I think under your beard, you're bleeding. So I actually walked myself back about 300 meters. There was a medic behind us. She's a Ukrainian medic that is with one of the units that we were working with. She's very identifiable. She has blue hair and a bunch of tattoos. And I can't believe how close she had her casualty collection point to where we were, because literally we packed our stuff up and walked not even 300 meters behind us and to the Ukrainian control point where they were running their show. And she was standing right there and she saw I was holding my neck and there was blood coming down my glove. And she just immediately threw me into the trench and started doing a whole assessment. And then in true, I don't know how much you guys have talked to Ukrainians, especially Ukrainian women. They don't tend to overreact to stuff. So she basically was just like, yeah, it's an injury. You got shrapnel in your neck, but you're probably going to be fine. Just take your gear off. And so she did the whole inspection on me and then was like, okay, be honest. Do you need to be evacuated right now? Because these M113s are drawing a lot of fire. And I was like, no, I can probably wait till tomorrow. I'm okay. Because it was nighttime at this point. So they just kept me there until the next morning. And then at like 5 or 6 a.m. the next morning, we walked to a safer route out of the zero line. Because I'm in a Belarusian unit. Our own medics picked me up and I was in an ambulance. And they did it was like being in an actual ambulance with paramedics who did like a full assessment and everything on the road. And then I got to the hospital in Kharkiv and then I chilled there for a week. And the doctors, because I saw a whole bunch of them, they weren't really panicking about my injury at all. They did one real assessment and sent me for some diagnostics. They were mostly concerned about concussions because we've had so many, the whole force here, the foreigners, the Ukrainians, everybody, we've had a lot of incidents this summer where guys were coming back from these blast injuries. But the thing about blast injuries is like we have so much, like our gear is so good now, like our helmets, our level 4, our ear pro, our even the straps on your helmet, everything like protect you from stuff that they're looking at dudes and being like, hey, his injuries aren't actually that bad and he seems to be okay. You just gave him a week off, he'd recover and everything. But then they have like delayed concussion syndromes. You know what I mean? So
from what you're describing with the gear, the neck is probably one of the few vulnerable.
Yeah, there are guys wearing neck protection too. Like if they know they're going to be in an area
but
where
you were not. Why were you not wearing neck protection?
You can only wear so much Kevlar, right? Like eventually you're so heavy you can't move. Drivers are a perfect example, right? Who are wearing more protection on their arms, legs, neck, face guards and stuff like that. And they know they're more exposed to those kind of wounds. I'm out like running around in the woods. So every ounce of Kevlar that you put on you means you're moving slower and then the drones find you faster. I would say my gear really did protect me quite a bit. Like I had my helmet and ear pro on, and even I wish I had taken a picture of it. It hadn't occurred to me at the time, but there was even little splinter, pieces of wood sticking out of the chin strap of my helmet, blocking stuff from penetrating my neck.
So souvenir.
Yeah.
Dave, presumably you understood the mission and what your purpose was. You're defending presumably a tree line.
Sorry, I should clarify a few details. So number one, we weren't defending, we were on the offensive for that one. So, which is, I know to the average person that doesn't mean much, but it's dramatically different. Like offensive is way harder. Like Clausewitz said, defense is the stronger form of warfare. And I agree with that guy because offense sucks. So that's why that particular situation was so dangerous. What I would say is we definitely were taking it to them and they felt it. And I should contextualize a little bit. It was about a month after Kursk started. And in that time, the Russians were really panicking where we were. We were the portion of the front closest to Kursk, obviously, north of Kharkiv. And they were... we took a whole schwack of prisoners this summer and captured a bunch of radios, and we were listening to them freak out after Kursk started. And every week that went by, you could tell the Russian chain of command was really putting the pressure on them to take back territory from us that we had taken, right? Because we were having a pretty successful summer. We took huge swaths of this particular wooded area. So they were quite panicky.
Was your unit identified by them?
I'm sure we're identified. I'm sure they know who we are. Yeah. Like everybody knows everybody once you're at the front. We know which Russian units are there, and they know who it is they're fighting against.
So, the doctors and nurses, do they seem just pure professionalism? Do they seem a little burnt out at this stage of the war? Have most of them been there for the last 2.5 years?
No, it was very It was very professional. I do think they're resource strapped. You definitely feel like they're doing what they can with what they got. There's not a lot of like amenities in the hospital. You know what I mean? Like you would have to hunt around to find a washroom with toilet paper and soap and stuff like that. So first of all, I will say the level of care is really impressive. Like if you show up and you're an injured soldier coming from the front, I had MRIs, fMRI, every scan. They really do take care of the guys that are coming from the front. But I did kind of feel like if you were to go open like the storage rooms and whatever, I don't think they're like bursting with resources. Because like Kharkiv is it's the last stop before Mordor. You get to Kharkiv, it's like the last outpost of civilization. After that, it's fighting. So you're in like the last real hospitals. Like these hospitals were real hospitals before the war. The staff, I definitely got the impression, like all the doctors, nurses, everybody worked there. It's obvious that they've been there the whole time. Like you can even just tell by the way they talk, the like day to day life. Like they see a soldier with 3rd-degree burns on 1/3 of his body, and they're like, "Yeah, this is pretty normal."
And you mentioned this was a hospital before the full scale war.
No. It's just a straight up. The first I went to the Kharkiv Regional Hospital, which is like in the downtown in the middle of the city,
and that's with civilians. You mean?
They're both. Neither of them was a military hospital. Now, granted, it's mostly military dudes walking around with serious injuries, but it's the real hospital you would go to if you phoned 911. And then they sent me to a hospital, had more specialists. It's where they had the machine, the one where they monitor everybody for concussions. And my head doctor, I don't know what you call him, I'm sorry, but the guy that worries about concussions, he spoke perfect English. He was clearly an expert in his field. You could tell that I was like, hey, yeah, I got blown up. And we had 6 other dudes evacuated that day for injuries, but I think I'm okay. And he's like, okay, I think you're okay too. But every time somebody says they're okay, and then 5 days later, they fall asleep at the wheel and get a car accident because they had a concussion and we didn't diagnose it correctly, I get in trouble. So you're staying here for a week. So I stayed there for a week.
Can you describe just a little bit more about the people you met in hospitals? So you said you were being observed for about a week. Mm-hmm. And who did you meet during that week, and what kinds of injuries did you see there?
So the dude in the bed right across from me had like 3rd-degree burns on probably about like 20 or 30% of his body.
How did he get those? Do you know?
I'm not really sure. He did not speak a word of English. Well, for the first couple of days, we didn't talk at all. He was just lying there in a big pile of pain. And then, over time, he got a lot better. People were coming and going. There was another guy from one of the more elite units in the Ukrainian Special Forces world who I had worked with his unit in the past. And when he found out that I was in the Legion, Gore Legion, he like made a deliberate effort to take his phone out, and we tried to Google Translate some conversations at least once or twice a day. He had just come from Chasiv Yar, and I don't know if you guys have been tracking what's going on in Chasiv Yar all summer, but that is like the worst fight that I mean, it's like the way Bakhmut was a year and a half ago. Like it is just absolute nightmare. And was
he able to share anything with you via Google Translate on what he?
Yeah, we talked quite a bit. And then, you got to remember, like, you're in a hospital, not everybody's feeling conversational. So like the nurse would come in and that would kind of rile everybody up, and there'd be a lot of conversations that I didn't understand because, everybody wants to talk about food or medicine or something. And then they all start changing stories or whatever.
What language were they mostly? I don't know if you could tell the difference, but were they mostly speaking Ukrainian, Russian?
It's kind of a mixture of languages. I would definitely say the hospital staff who are older generally speak Russian or Surzhyk, which is like Surzhyk. It's like a pidgin language.
It's Russian. A mixture of Russian and Ukrainian.
Right? Yeah. The thing about language and navigating these kind of like Byzantine institutions when you're an English speaker, it's not like it's new to anybody else, right? There's a lot of foreign fighters walking around. There's Chechens, Georgians, Russians. Like there's a lot of Russian fighters here. And there's a lot of Westerners from many different countries and languages. So if you show up and you speak French or Italian or Spanish or something, it's not like it is a huge stumbling block to the nurses. To the average person, if you said, hey, you got concussed in a foreign country where you don't speak the language, it's a fairly frightening experience to go into a hospital like that. But I would say here, you're just another one that doesn't speak the language. The younger Ukrainians can really switch back and forth between Russian and Ukrainian quite easily. It's noticeable too. Like I've listened to so much of it, you can tell when they're doing one or the other. The further west you go, the more the language becomes a part of Ukrainian identity. A good friend of mine is a stand-up comedian. He's Belarusian in my unit, but he was a stand-up comedian before the war. And he said he could not get work in Kyiv because his Ukrainian just wasn't good enough, and they didn't want to hear him speaking Russian.
I'm wondering what you're hearing about videos circulating. And some of them it's difficult for us, certainly sitting here in New York, to gauge the accuracy because so much of it is circulating in online media, allegedly depicting Russians hunting civilians in Kherson. It's being dubbed as almost safari style. There have been a few videos circulating, I think, on Telegram.
I mean, yeah, I've heard that it's happening, but mostly just through the news as well. Are they hunting civilians in Kherson? I wouldn't put it past them.
Another thing is the videos of captured Ukrainian POWs being killed, after being disarmed. What are you hearing there in eastern Ukraine?
Murdering Ukrainian POWs? Yeah, I'm sure that's happening. I'm sure it's happened in sectors of the front that I was on. Yeah, I know guys, Ukrainian dudes in their units who have just straight up said that happened. Their colleagues got captured and were murdered. And they know because they tried to arrange a prisoner exchange to get them back. And the Russians were like, nah, they're dead. You're not going to get those guys. We got other guys, but those guys are dead. But I would say, the Ukrainians treat the detainees that they take very well for a bunch of reasons. Number one, they are a huge source of intelligence. Like I can't tell you how much information we get from them, actionable stuff that we use right away. Number two, they really do want to exchange them back for their own guys, right? So they don't. I don't want to say they treat them nicely or whatever, but like I've definitely seen like they on the line, they question them right away. They have a whole process to take them off the line. They give them medical attention right away. They give them tea. They give them food. They make sure like they're not freaking out, and they're like, "Hey, we're not gonna torture you. We're not gonna kill you. Like you know what I mean? Like we're gonna treat you well because we really, really." They call it the exchange fund. Like on the radio, they actually say, "Hey, we got 2 more for the exchange fund," because they really do want to exchange them back for their own guys. And I would like to think, based on the amount of these prisoner exchanges that go on, I don't think the Russians are as hospitable as the Ukrainians. But I do think they have a strong deterrent to murder POWs. And I do think the crazy, bloodthirsty, horrible people that did shit like Bucha and, Wagner with the sledgehammers, a lot of them are dead, right? Like we've killed a lot of those guys. Like generally the more horrific psychopathic dudes, they're not actually good fighters. A lot of them are dead. So I think you have a lot more rational calculators at the tactical level who are like, we need our troops back just for pragmatic purposes. Like we can't send these meat waves out if they keep getting captured. So I do think the exchange fund, not to say that it makes the Russians more humane or whatever, but I do think it makes them a lot more calculating about preserving human life. And, and I've met Ukrainians that were in captivity. Like I've met guys that were captured for months and then, exchanged back. And they're still in the military fighting. So I think there's a whole world of that stuff that we don't hear about in the news, Westerners know nothing about, because when those negotiations go on, man, it's like literally a Ukrainian talking to a Russian on a radio at the front, where they're like, hey, we got 17 dudes. How many you got? They organize an exchange point, they secure the roads and everything, and they go do a drop off.
So the goal is to exchange them as quickly as possible.
No, I wouldn't say it's quickly. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how it works, but it's not always quick. Like some of these dudes are in captivity for weeks or months. Because I think there's like a lot of, when I say negotiation, I mean, it's like a pressure cooker of a negotiation.
Right. It sounded casual on a video, but yeah. Now, but getting back to these videos, I mean, they're obviously horrible videos and images of allegedly of POWs who've either been killed or starved, and they circulate on Telegram channels. We can't gauge the accuracy. Does this impact morale on the battlefield?
It really, really impacts the Ukrainian morale when guys get captured. I would actually say it impacts it more than when they get killed. When dudes get detained, because for someone to get detained, they have to be severed from their unit, right? Which means either people fell back when they shouldn't have fallen back, or a position got overrun or something. So like it is absolutely horrible. And the unit, I've been attached to units that lost guys in the sector that we were at. And like their mission in life is not to win the war. Their mission in life is to get their friends back. Literally when they go out on the offensive, like they're going to take back that Russian position because they want their friends back. So
what negatively influences the morale is the fact that their buddies have been detained and they have to get them back.
Yeah.
But the social media around the POWs on Telegram, the social media itself is not affecting the battlefield morale.
The thing to remember is to Westerners, right? Like when you're watching social media almost like a grad student, right? Like you're doing research and looking at stuff and you're kind of like consuming this content, and that's very other to you. That content on the other end is from a completely different world, right? Like these guys just message each other. You know what I mean? Like when the Ukrainians figure out which Russian unit is in their sector, they will go on their Telegram channel and trash talk them or be like, hey, you captured my friend, I want him back. It's not this one-way consumption of social media.
No, you're right. When it outside of the conflict, it is a grad student is a perfect example. You're studying it, you're wondering what to believe.
Yes.
When you're there, first of all, they probably have a very good idea on what to believe and what's propaganda.
I have stood in a trench while a Ukrainian sergeant or whoever was the commander at that particular position, showed me video of that trench being hit by mortars the day before on a Russian Telegram channel. Like they filmed it with their drone and put it on Telegram. And he was like, look, this is where we're standing now 2 days ago. It's not just out there in the expansive internet to them the same way like I look up stuff on YouTube. They're like, it's, and they knew which unit it was.
You could suss out much better what's real and what's not in real time on a day-to-day basis because you're actually there.
I definitely feel like if you asked around for a day or two, you could find out like, that happened. Or no, that's complete Russian propaganda. That didn't happen. I saw in your email you had a question about Telegram or whatever. Like Telegram, to my knowledge, I couldn't believe how much it was still used here in Eastern Europe when I got here, because it's well known to be penetrated by the FSB. Back in the Canadian military, like when I was working with some of the 3-letter agencies from the US and stuff, they even said like Telegram is the FSB's app.
You mentioned that the Russian POWs, many of the POWs that you were taking were conscripts. Is that right? Because that's somewhat controversial inside Russia. By that, do you mean a lot of them were 18 or 19-year-olds with no military experience? That sounds a little bit like trying to pull out all the stops.
But they're not though. Like Russian society is not crumbling. Conscription is not this thing that's going to topple Putin's regime. Russian society has just accepted they're at permanent war now, and that's how it is. NATO is pretending they're not at war. Russians have psychologically accepted they are at permanent war. That is the problem.
Well, I understand the different psychology. I'm just curious, can you describe a little bit about the Russian POWs you said were conscripts? Are these post high schoolers? And
I can say I only personally saw like single digits of them, but they were all like, they're not super young. They're not kids. They were like 20s, 30s. And the dead bodies were all older because there's dead bodies everywhere now. Like the whole front smells because this fighting, especially in the areas where it's been going back and forth for 2.5 years now, there's just bodies everywhere. They're older. It's not like a Hollywood movie where everybody looks like they're Lawrence Fishburne in Apocalypse Now. You know what I mean? They're not that young. You can tell they're conscripts because they don't know what the hell they're doing. They shoot at you and then you shoot back and they run away. A lot of times we just send a Russian speaker up to their trench, and in Russian, he just says, "Hey, what unit are you from?" And they tell him the unit, and he's like, "Okay, you're captured now." They're noobs. It doesn't necessarily mean they're 17 years old. They could be 25, 30, 35. But I will say, on average, they're younger than a lot of the Ukrainians you see at the front. The Ukrainian line units, there's a lot of old dudes walking around because a lot of them are like, I got to go fight for my country. I have to go do it. So even though they are also not as professional and trained, they're more motivated. They want to be professional on the Ukrainian side. Whereas on the Russian side, sometimes when they took the prisoner, because we always hand them over to the Ukrainians, the foreign fighters, it's their war. We're always like, as soon as we have a detainee, it's like over to Ukraine to handle it. When you hand them to the Ukrainians, it's almost like they're like joking.
You're saying like some of the conscripts are actually glad to get out of the fight.
Yeah, you can tell, like, dude, I've seen their faces. A lot of them are like, I am just so glad the shooting's over. They're not happy about being caught, but being caught is way better than being shot in the face. So, yeah, I would say many of them are obviously relieved. When you take a detainee, the first thing you want to know is, how many more of you guys are there here? Are we about to get swarmed? What's going on? So you immediately sit them down and be like, what unit are you from? How big is your team? How many casualties have you taken? Are there more people coming? It's not like an interrogation where you're trying to figure out higher level intelligence. You're trying to figure out the stuff that's going on right then and there. And I've been there when they're being questioned in this way. And it is so obvious that they don't know what's going on. They don't even know how to use their radios. They don't know what the passwords are. They're fodder. Meat wave is almost a compliment for them because it implies that they have some sort of agency, like they could run at us as a wave. They don't know what they're doing. It's very different than when I got to Ukraine, is when Bakhmut was falling and we were in Donbass. And it's way different than fighting there. When it was 3rd Assault Brigade fighting Wagner, you knew that the guys on the other side of the battlefield knew what they were doing. When you're fighting Wagner or VDV or one of the more elite guards units, you can tell by the weight of the fire shooting at you. Like they try maneuvers, like you can tell they're trying to flank you. It's very obvious that you are fighting professionals. If you stopped paying attention for a second, they were going to get the upper hand on you. And it does not feel that way when you're fighting conscripts.
So it's not that the conscripts are especially young. They're just inexperienced in the ways of war.
Yeah. And, sorry, I'm just going to sidetrack here for a second because there is this documentary called Russians at War that I think it might have played at the Toronto International Film Festival.
That was a huge controversy on social media.
Yeah, yeah.
And you as a Canadian, and then you're actually, I think, a native of Toronto. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's where I'm from, yeah.
Yeah, so how did you feel about that being scheduled with the Toronto Film Festival?
Well, I mean, I didn't really have any feelings about that, although now that you've said it, I am thinking about it more. But it's a huge mistake to censor or silence or protest or boycott that, because I think you can't do defensive psychological operations. So if you are suppressing someone else's free speech in Canada, you're playing right into Putin's hands. And what I would say is, after having done this rotation here this summer, I would say you could absolutely make a good documentary about Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine. And I would say, filmmakers in the West should make the same movies about Ukrainians. You know what I mean? Like, get a stronger narrative out there. Don't suppress free speech in free countries. Like, that's the mistake. One day I will watch that movie when I get the chance to sit down and see it, because, if you want to show a movie about a bunch of ignorant Russian conscripts that don't know what the hell they gotten themselves into, I'm there for that. I would believe it. I would like to see it.
Last year I wrote an essay on soft power where I wrote about the NAFO fellas. They were seen as a little bit of an instrument of soft power and social media, and that they are supporters of Ukraine. But the mood has certainly darkened since then. How are the NAFO fellows viewed by actual fighters in Eastern Ukraine? Or is it sort of too trivial for them to think about?
No, it's quite positive. There's stickers and posters everywhere. The Ukrainians have them on their trucks. They have NAFO patches. Like, NAFO is, I would say, generally positively viewed. I don't think they're viewed as diminishing what's going on here. I think they're viewed as kind of it's also very Western. I would just say NAFO is a very Western thing. It's not super well understood in Ukraine. The young English speakers from Western Ukraine get it, but it's not widespread. But they have their own hilarious stuff too. 3rd Assault Brigade right now, who I've worked with, a few times. They're well known for being what we in the West would call casualty tolerant. They basically have a recruiting campaign going on right now. If you understand who they are and if you understand Ukrainians, it's actually quite funny. It's basically like a bunch of hot women on billboards being like, "Ooh, he's in 3rd Assault Brigade."
That sounds very World War II, actually. The pinup.
Oh, dude, it is the posters. Yeah, other than the fact, if you can't read Ukrainian, you wouldn't even know it's a military recruiting poster. It is basically like a beer commercial from the 90s. He's in 3rd Assault Brigade, hot, and it's all these beautiful women. And it's like, if you've ever met anyone from 3rd Assault Brigade, it is hilarious. I think I've seen some articles in Western English language outlets that take like huge offense to it. And I could see how you would be offended if you didn't understand what was going on here. 3rd Assault Brigade, they are so highly regarded. They were fighting Wagner and Bakhmut before it was cool. They just have this kind of real ironic sense of humor about themselves. When you're around it, you're like, that is funny. You've almost found a way to make a joke out of how serious the situation is. Because they're constantly getting killed, because they're constantly doing the most dangerous stuff, because they're constantly trying to be the best unit in Ukraine. And they can also somehow turn it into a joke.
The use of humor, and definitely the pinup girls. And actually, Frank talks sometimes about how the opposite also was done in World War I in Britain, shaming men who weren't serving.
That's a thing, 100%.
My grandmother used to walk around handing out white feathers in Australia during World War I.
Yeah. Dude, I'm not joking. I was at a dinner party, or not dinner party, but I was like having dinner at a friend's house once, where I was with one of my Belarusian friends, who he's dating a Ukrainian girl, and we were having dinner at her family's house. One of her male relatives, I don't know if it was like her brother or uncle, or I'm not sure who it was, but was he didn't speak any English, but he was talking to my Belarusian friend, and he was basically saying, like, why are you here doing this? And my Belarusian friend was saying, like, hey man, like, we're fighting the same enemy. The Soviet religion is occupying my country. We got to save your country so that I can go back and free Belarus. And then the Ukrainian guy was like, why are you fighting here? Like, pointing at me. He was like, why is this Canadian fighting here? And the girl's dad, who was like well into his 60s, just launched on this dude. He was like, he's fighting because you're not. He's at the front line defending our country because you won't go do it. So that issue of conscription and the guys not volunteering and these squads that are going around basically forcing people to register for conscription. It's getting really tense. It's getting a lot more tense than when I got here a year and a half ago. You can see the cops stopping people. I saw it today. Like, the cops are stopping men on the street. They're just, like, literally cornering them, and they can't get away, and saying, like, why haven't you registered?
But it also begs the question too about the number of Ukrainian young men who are terrified of going into something that they are not at all able to adjust to, have absolutely no idea. And
I would say, sorry, I think that a lot of these guys don't want to go fight because they're like, dude, we don't even have weapons. Like, we don't have ammunition. Like, if you want to increase Ukrainian recruitment, give them ATACMS and let them strike targets in Russia. Like, recruitment will go through the roof.
Nevertheless, there is a pessimism. How do the Ukrainians overcome that?
Ukrainians have, there's an appreciation for humor here that is unique to them. And there is, like, this weird sort of cult of humor that goes on in Ukraine. That you can feel it when you're around them, especially when you're around their soldiers and their old people. Like, the old people have this kind of gruff exterior that once you go to dinner with them, you realize, like, oh, they're just making jokes all the time. You can't sense it until you're sort of in the middle of it. I think that, like, it is serious and dark here and horrible, but there is an angle to this war that it's really hard to explain, but it's absolutely hilarious. The internet generation, people, slightly younger than me that have grown up with the internet, they don't really take anything that seriously, and they are quite funny about everything, and everything is a potential meme to them. And that's true in Ukraine as it is anywhere else. Some of the young Belarusian guys that I work with that are like 25, 26 years old, they almost get killed, and then they send you a GIF of them almost getting killed. There's just kind of a gallows humor to this war that I think is underappreciated, and it's definitely palpable.
And that's it from the Delegates Lounge. We'd like to thank our esteemed guests who've graciously allowed us to share their hard-earned insights into what really matters. And then there's you, our listeners, who we hope are sufficiently edified to clamour for more of the same. Do drop in for a weekly episode on Thursday, or from time to time if we're on the road for special events, in which case there'll be a bonus episode. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like what you've heard, please take a moment to rate or review the show, as it helps others who share your abiding interest in world affairs to find their way to the Delegates Lounge. You can connect with us on many popular social media platforms, or reach out to us directly at info@thedelegateslounge.com. We're a small team, so we can't respond to every message, but we will read them. Our show this week was written and produced by the host and by yours truly, executive producer Frank Radford. Until next time, keep calm and curious.